So we are here with Christopher Hale, the author, the founder, the creator of Letters from Leo, a very timely Substack about the first American Pope in history. Christopher, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I have a few
Pablo,
quick questions. Yeah,
thank you for having me. No better place to spend a Saturday night, right? This is where we want to be, right?
exactly. In the thick of it. So my first question, let's go to this scoop out of the Pentagon, right? Pete Hegseth assails a Vatican diplomat. Your newsletter confirmed the details about this senior Pentagon official and sort of the the inter Vatican fallout. Tell us, how did you get this scoop, and what does it say about the Vatican as like an administration under Pope Leo?
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild story. So let me kind of go through it. So we have Easter Sunday. Of course, Pope Leo XIV has been having some barn burners homilies. He said, "Lay down your arms," and so that really kind of took up a lot of the energy. And then Trump's wild tweet on Easter Sunday. But on Monday morning at 6 a.m., the Free Press, through an Italian freelance writer who is well respected in Italy and has close connections to the Vatican, puts out this story. But I want to note it was 6 a.m. on Monday, and for some reason I don't know why, but like it didn't really like get out there. The Free Press didn't tweet about it. It was kind of buried on their website. This young man, this great author, this writer didn't tweet about it, but on Wednesday morning he did about early in the morning. And so I see it and it only has like a few views and I was like, wow, this is a wild story. Um, and so I immediately make phone calls. And so I spoke to people both stateside. I have good relationships. I've been living and working around Washington, D.C. for about 15 years. So I had a really good relationship with folks in Pentagon who were able to confirm the veracity of the meeting. Number one, it's wild that this meeting took place in the first place. The ambassador to the Vatican ambassador to the United States is a diplomat. He's not someone that goes to the Pentagon. He's
Right.
not someone that goes to the Pentagon. So it was wild that that meeting took place in the first and at the very first. But then there's this second part, which has been more contested over time. Everyone agrees that the meeting was tense, that there was this back and forth. That basically, for the Washington Post, they added to the story that it was about Pope Leo XIV. He gave a State of the World address in mid January where he talked about the zeal for war. And if you recall, that was right after Venezuela, the invasion of Venezuela, the military operation there. And he said the respect for boundaries that were set up and the principles of the Second World War had been completely violated.
Mm.
And so, honestly, the Pentagon was correct to feel attacked. They were being correct. They correctly read that they were attacked by Pope Leo XIV, and they tried to justify their military action. And Washington Post hints that they were also justifying future military action, perhaps previewing what they were going to try to do in Iran and God forbid, Cuba maybe as well. And so my source and the Free Press sources and also the Financial Times sources all detailed that one of the State Department or the Pentagon officials brought up the Avignon papacy. So anyone who has done CCD, this is a little bit beyond CCD, but the Avignon papacy was a 14th century phenomenon where the
Mm.
French regime, the French Empire, was upset at the Bishop of Rome, at the papacy, and so they by force moved the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, out of Rome into Avignon in France, and through coercion and through military violence, controlled the papacy for about 80 years. In fact, it led to the death of Pope Boniface VIII. So this is a wild, weird thing to bring up. The question was, is it a joke? Was it a threat? Some people saw it as a threat in the Vatican. I'm confident that, and the Free Press and Financial Times is confident that now both the Vatican and so officials in both sides have pushed back on some of the details of it. But that's what diplomats do. They want to kind of maintain face. I'm confident of the veracity of the story. But this is just a wild. I mean, this is absolutely a wild phenomenon. And I think it gives a little bit more color to Pope Leo has spoken out against the Trump administration from the get go, from his election on May 8th. But anyone who can count to 10 has seen over length, over the past 6 weeks, over the Iran war, every day, including today, his words have gotten more and more intense against this war. And so I think maybe this gives a little bit more color to why that's happening.
So On domestic policy, I think one of the first things that Leo criticized were mass deportations and the detentions that were going on, specifically during his ascent in Chicago, like right up the way from where he's from. He has empowered bishops like Michael Pham in San Diego to walk with migrants to their immigration court appearances, ostensibly to observe the dignity of immigrants and all people, but also as an obvious show of force because the Roman collar is a very distinct symbol in these situations with a very long history in social justice advocacy, putting their bodies on the line. In this sort of deployment of mercy, I think, as a Roman Catholic would see it and say it, I think Pope Leo would agree. In this deployment of mercy into these hopeless situations to witness the dignity, has there been a moment so far that where Leo's like really surprised you? And do you think that, he's doing all that he could do? What are the limits of his papacy in this regard?
Well, let's go back to, I mean, so we people might not know this, but Leo, his ascent to the papacy was quick. This man was like, I met Leo, I met Father Prevost a decade ago, mind you. So
That's so
just a
cool.
quick, yeah, he was just a priest, and so I think that his ascent to being a priest to the Pope in a decade is just wild in itself. But his last job at the Vatican was the prefect for the dicastery of bishops. It's a lot of words, but basically he was in charge of appointing bishops
Okay.
across the world. And one of the things I really see that's important to note is that it takes a long time to get your house in order with a 1.4 billion member church. So Francis was pope for about 13 years, but it took a long time, actually 12 years, pardon me, but it took a long time for his desire, his idea of a bishop to kind of start making it to the United States. So during the first presidency of Donald Trump, we did not see nearly that as much pushback from the Catholic bishops. But finally, what we call Francis Bishop started coming into the fold near the end of his papacy. So we really have seen a lot more pushback with bishops in the second Trump presidency, and we can credit Pope Francis for that. But remember, who is appointing bishops for Pope Francis the last 2 years of his pontificate? It's Leo the 14th. And
Right.
so three of the first four appointments that Pope Leo makes in the United States are immigrants, which is absolutely an incredible message. His first appointment was Bishop Michael Pham, as you mentioned
San
in
Diego.
San Diego, and people can go to letters from Leo, the lettersfromleo.com, and just Google his name. But he, as you know, Pablo, he had this incredible encounter. He goes to the ICE detention facilities. He goes to the court cases, and he has his priest go. And Tom Homan, who's Catholic, at least understands that the visual of priests getting into a scuffle with ICE is not ideal. So the power, as you said, of the Roman collar is poignant in this administration. It works as a deterrent. So I would say yes, first is bishops, but let's go with the Leo himself. Leo, by nature, Francis is bombastic. He's Latino. We'll take it or leave it. He says what he thinks. He's prophetic. Whatever. He's guttural. Leo is more reserved. He's a lawyer. He's a canon lawyer. But he slowly, throughout his pontificate, has gotten more and more, I would say, comfortable in his own skin. And my favorite Pope Leo genre is every Tuesday, he's a quiet guy. And so Monday night, so priests get off Monday. Any priests in the audience know Monday's their day off. It's their Sunday. He goes to Castel Gandolfo, which is like a retreat house outside of Rome. And on Tuesday, when he comes back into Rome, he has a little presser, like a weekly presser. It's like the equivalent of Trump in the helicopter. And
Okay.
on September 30th, he gives this remarkable presser. And this is, I think, when Leo started hitting the consciousness of the American people, where he was asked about the Trump immigration policy. And he said famously that you cannot be pro life and mistreat immigrants. You cannot be pro life and support the death penalty. He enlarged what it meant to be pro life. Now, for most Catholics that are somewhat progressive, that's very normal language. But for conservative Catholics, that was a tough pill to swallow. But also, too, for I think MAGA evangelicals, that is language that they're not used to hearing. And so I think what most important about this, though, is that Catholics, we're not used to the man in the white cassock speaking natural, fluent English.
Yeah.
And you and I are
Chicago, like suburban Illinois English.
Yeah,
It's great.
and what's remarkable about it is that, like, I see this so clearly. When someone's written out about what Leo says, okay, people, like, take it and like it, but when there's videos of Leo speaking in English, that's when these things really break through, and so that comment on
Interesting.
September 30th broke through. Um, Leo's superpower is speaking English and speaking English well. And so
Hmm.
that I think that was the most remarkable moment I've seen up besides these up previous weeks in Iran, but particularly on migration. I think that September 30th comment, along with his appointment of bishops who are too much to their credit, we get a lot of critiques on the left, but they've done well. They've done really
Yeah.
well on this.
That's the thing. The Roman Catholic Church has been out and center on posing mass deportation policies as inhumane, evil, um, from the jump. Like from the jump, there were always priests. Like there was a moment about a year ago when at 26 Federal Plaza, a woman named Monica was assaulted by an ICE agent in the hallway. They're like 12, 13 news cameras in the hallway. It got captured from every possible angle. But what wasn't captured by any of those news cameras was the like de-escalating moments after where they were assessing her head that had been slammed onto the floor and a priest appeared and said, I know where we could go, and took her across the street to Congressman Dan Goldman's district office, which is across the street from 26 Federal Plaza in Midtown. And Congressman Dan Goldman, his staffers and the priests took her to the hospital. But it's like in moments like that, even in the early stages of the ugly global embarrassment, the global shame that is mass deportation policies in this second Trump term, the Catholic priests were already there. Like it was almost like they didn't even need to be told, but Pope Leo telling them made them even more proud to do it. Like the videos that the bishops have released, where they all take like a sentence from a larger dissertation and
Mhm.
just talk it through. They're pretty epic. Like these are some really strong presences, like on camera and in the community. So,
And
but going back to foreign policy, Leo, is, as you said, is out front now on Iran and the wars that are escalating in that part of the world. What leverage do you see his papacy having for impact in that situation? Or could Netanyahu and Trump ignore the Pope and his overtures? Like, are there if the Secretary of Defense feels emboldened enough to scold a foreign diplomat instead of a Vatican diplomat, right? Which is kind of like how I interpreted this situation as a casual observer of the story. Um, yeah, how does the Pope flex in a way that's meaningful and impactful?
I would say this: there's 77 million Catholics in the United States. We're the biggest religious denomination in this country, and we have historically been the swing vote that unlocks the presidency.
Hmm.
Donald Trump won the Catholic vote handily in 2024. I've been in a lot of tit and tat about why that happened. I was very vocal in the Kamala Harris campaign about the need to actually do Catholic outreach. There was not a lot of Catholic outreach, and the numbers, when you talk about the bleeding of brown and black voters in this country, those are disproportionately Catholic voters that we lost. So I think that was something that
That's true.
I think it's something that really costs us. So what I'm getting at is I think that the ability to impact the Catholic worldview in the United States is his superpower. And so I'm a political operative by day. Letters from Leo is my night gig. But to me, like, if you can make a dent of 5% of Catholic vote and change your mind on President Trump, that is a huge deal. That is the presidency of the United States. Everyone knows that if you only have 85% of your base with you, you lose an election. So I am seeing two things that I think are important. Number one, I'm seeing a divide in MAGA world between Catholics and evangelicals. And I want to explain why I think that is. Um, the question of Israel
Hmm.
is diehard in the MAGA evangelical consciousness and evangelical consciousness writ large. Support for the modern state of Israel is just baked in. It's a requirement. It is almost dogmatic in identity. It's never been that case with Catholicism. However, I want to delineate two things I think maybe is important for the viewers to know. Pope John Paul II, who we all grew up in the Holocaust. He, of course, his best friend in Poland was Jewish. He had a deep reverence for the Jewish community. Benedict the 16th also grew up in the Holocaust. Was unfortunately forced to go into the Hitler Youth against his will as a 12-year-old, and so he had particular intimate experiences with the Holocaust, and that made both of those men particularly supportive of the state of Israel, understandably, as a project. But you don't see that as much with Pope Francis, who grew up in Argentina. He had close Jewish allies, but he was not as deeply invested in the idea of the state of Israel being so important to Catholic consciousness. And quite frankly, we don't see that as much as well with Leo the 14th. He's been quite critical of the Israel nation state. Israel struck in Gaza the Catholic parish of Holy Family, which people might know is the only Catholic parish in Gaza. And for the last 18 months of his life, Pope Francis would call the parish priest in Gaza.
That's
And
right.
so it's a very beautiful moment. So what am I trying to say? I think that MAGA Catholics are less supportive of the Israel US led war in Iran than evangelical MAGA. And there's a split
Mm.
there. And you're seeing that online. You're starting to see it in the numbers. And I think that is really, going to be if President Trump loses 10%, even 5% of MAGA Catholics because of the war in Iran, that is going to be in his calculus, I think, on how long this lasts. So there is political power in the Catholic Church on the right too. And we can talk about this in a little bit, but I think that for my party, for Democrats, that is really where we need to be leaning into is opposing this war and creating a big tent in our party as well for those who are against this war and might not be with us on other issues.
In terms of Leo's messaging, though, it seems like he has to be aware that he's going to have to seed some audience, like in his message, who are belligerently MAGA and diametrically opposed to his explicit mandates to Catholics everywhere to be generous and welcoming to the foreigner and, not mass deport your neighbors. Um, how do you think he is approaching his audience as someone who receives all of his messages every time he goes out, does a media appearance, writes something? What audiences in American Catholicism do you think he's really hoping to secure versus the ones that he knows he's going to have to give up?
Yeah, I mean, so the way I see it is like a good reporter almost or a good politician is Leo is very responsive to what is in the news. And
Mm,
the fact that he's taking questions, if you think about it, like historically, even so, Pope Francis was the first pope to really do interviews. Like it was like a new genre, but he did it with print reporters. It was long form, and we didn't see the video necessarily. And he wasn't a scrum. It wasn't like the Donald Trump type of scrum. But what I'm getting at is I think that really for 6 months, those questions were all about immigration. From August till February, all the questions were about immigration, and so I think that MAGA completely discounted him. MAGA Catholics discounted him on immigration and just didn't take it seriously. I think because of the core skepticism of the war, but also in terms of the Catholic worldview is not once again as beholden to support for the state of Israel, um, uh, uh, carte blanche. And so I think they're kind of
no,
hitting
that's like
him
an
as somebody.
evangelical thing. They're like
It is
upset,
an evangelical thing,
but
100%.
yeah,
And I think what I'm getting and what I think he's doing is I think he's real. I think he can see. I think Pope Leo can see that he's actually having more of an impact on the question of Iran than he ever had on migration. I didn't see his message make a big dent on the right on migration. I'm seeing it make a dent on Iran. So I think he'll continue honing in on that. And so I don't think he will. I mean, if you look at what's happened since Palm Sunday, the past 2 weeks, he's been the most vocal that he's been in his 1 year pontificate. So to answer your
yeah.
question, obviously Pope Leo supports the dignity of migrants, but I think he's seeing that he has more impact right now on the question of Iran.
I don't understand why he doesn't I mean, again, I don't understand because I'm not Pope, but um, why not if Pete Hegseth is assailing the diplomatic help, demand a meeting with or invite Melania Trump to the Vatican and start making, I guess, like the diplomatic inroads for that face to face with either President Trump or if, he doesn't make it through the term for natural causes or whatever, but President Vance, like understandably that Vance is sort of an asset that has been tried and it didn't really work like when he went and visited Francis in his final days. I know he as a Catholic is like a brand new Catholic. He just like converted and stuff. But Melania Trump is like a lifelong Catholic, and I have wondered that a lot, like why Leo isn't making overtures because when you look at the photographs of Trump's visit to the Vatican with Melania, all of the photographs where Francis is interacting with Melania has the warmest, most
He got
sincere
along.
smile
Yeah,
on
you're
his
right.
face. And every photograph where he's interacting or being forced to interact with Trump visually is just, grim and very concerned kind of look on his face. But the smiles with Melania, I feel like were always very much overlooked as a Catholic, as a Roman Catholic. Like this is a much more potent avenue toward the presidency here. I mean, look what she did just this week, demanding a podium and you know, basically slowly walking away from her husband on the Epstein files from the White House in the middle of the day. She clearly can kind of do what she wants, and it's like again, she's always been rumored to be somebody who wants to go to church every day, who wants to be a Catholic, but I guess another question that I think another topic that Leo has weighed in on, um, is artificial intelligence, and I think
Mhm.
there's a social encyclical coming out soon. Is that right? Um,
Yes, and we think it should drop before his trip to Spain in June, so within the next weeks, so
wow.
soon.
What do you expect? What do you think? First of all, what is a major social encyclical in the context of a papacy?
Sure. I just want to take one small comment on the Melania. I think it's a great idea. So Pope Leo's brother is a subscriber to Letters from Leo, so I hope he's watching this so he can get that idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. A lot of people remember the image of Donald Trump and Pope Francis, but you're right. Not enough people remember that there was a contrast between how Francis seemed to get along well with Melania, but didn't get along well, of course, with President Trump. So, what an encyclical is, so it's the word is Latin in origin, and it's a letter to the world. So that is what the word encyclical means. So it's supposed to be a letter to the world. The genre of encyclical has changed quite a bit. It used to be, as you before the internet, it would be printed and maybe a paragraph or two on, B12 of the New York Times, and then they print copies and go to parishes. But Pope Francis really changed the genre of encyclical with Laudato Si. A lot of our viewers will remember that in 2015. It was about climate change, and it really impacted a lot of the conversation in the primaries of the 2016 election. In 2015, 2016, it got questions in both Democratic and Republican primaries, and it affected the conversation. Leo is trying to do that with artificial intelligence. And so that we know that it's going to touch on it
Okay.
in a profound way. He is concerned with the economic question. From my understanding, he doesn't know if he can add a lot more there. And the Pope's not an economist, but he really does want to dive into the question of how it impacts how we view what it means to be a human being. I hope, and I think that from my understanding, this will be a direct challenge to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley had Mark Andreessen. I, we can cuss here. Shit tweeted the Pope maybe in November because the Pope talked about a ethically driven AI. Silicon Valley does not like the idea of having an ethical construct come over AI because they think it slows down growth.
Mm.
And Peter Thiel, who everyone knows, I mean, Peter Thiel thinks that anything that slows down technological innovation is the Antichrist. Of course, he himself has suggested that Leo the 14th is the woke American Pope. So to be taken with a grain of salt. But I think
Yeah,
it'll be a challenge. I
case
think it'll be a
confused.
challenge to Silicon Valley. I think it'll be a challenge to Silicon Valley. And I think that what I see in my work, my daily work, is that so this is somewhat proprietary data, but I can talk about it in this way. If you see the drop of the American people's conception of what they feel about Silicon Valley between about 2021 to today, it's
Mm,
very similar to the drop of how people felt about Wall Street from 2023 to 2028. There's about a 20,
interesting.
25% walk about drop. And one of my worldviews is that in their flesh, the American people know what a bubble is, even if they don't see they can't figure out the data or something.
Mm,
They know something's up. So I think that Leo is hitting at the right time. It would be the equivalent of if Pope Benedict XVI had written an encyclical about financial ethics in 2007. I think the timing is good. He's preceding something that's obviously coming down the pipe. I think it will add a lot to the conversation.
interesting. Um, yeah, that's really interesting because the tech bros are obviously sort of also central to the MAGA rise in the second election, and JD Vance was always sort of an intermediary between people specifically like Peter Thiel and the millennial MAGA like Chappie. Um, yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye on that. That's really cool. So you've been building a reader supported publication on a beat that barely existed just a year ago. What does Letters from Leo look like, say, 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I should note that people, if I look tired, I am. This is really a side gig. Like I have a day job. I'm a political operative. I do fundraising. I work in democratic politics. Do a little bit of consulting. So it was unexpected that this would pop off the way it did. I don't give myself credit. I think that the American people are just genuinely um, excited to have an American pope. My readership might find this surprising. They're all gathered here today, but we do surveys, and about 50% of my readers identify as not religious. So I actually have a somewhat secular crowd who are interested in Pope Leo the 14th. So the short answer to your question is I don't know. I'm Catholic. I'm a believer. It's not just a passing fad or something I report on or think it's interesting for politics. And so one of the deep parts of my religious worldview, and this is being educated by the Jesuits. You were educated at Notre Dame, the Holy Cross priests, but the Jesuits always taught you to have what we call like a spirit of docility, of openness. They always described like a good Christian's like a shortstop. You kind of go to the left or the right at the crack of the bat. And so I don't know what it will look like in 5 years. I hope that I can find a more sustainable way of doing it. The way we kind of talk about that is scaling up, but I cannot keep it on my own. I know that for sure. So there's going to have to be a more sustainable way of doing it. But we are exploding, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for the subscribers, the donors, the readers. Whether you give $0 or $1,000, it's really meant a lot. And it's been a I would say a great consolation. I think that what I hope for it writ large, and I've interviewed with Fox and Crux and a few other publications. We are on the left. We're identified as the left. I'm not a nonpartisan. I do have partisan beliefs, but I believe my faith precedes my politics. And so I want this to be a sustainable resource for the Catholic left. I think the Catholic left should do two things. I think the Catholic left should challenge the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party is always in need of reform. And I think we can help make the Democratic Party bigger and more inclusive. But also, too, I think the most important thing we can do is defeat MAGA authoritarianism. I think that is the most important thing that the Catholic Church can do. And I want to be a part of that. I'm from Tennessee, and I think what a lot of reporters miss and a lot of people miss is that like the Catholic Church is the heart of the resistance in MAGA America. We are in Kansas. We had Catholic bishops standing up in Arkansas, in Nashville, all across this country in deep red states. It's the Catholic Church that is leading the resistance in this country, and I want Letters from Leo to be a mobilizing source. but I want us to also have the impact of our party as well. My party is in need of some work, and I think the Catholic left can help make it bigger and better.
And have you reached out to the Vatican to interview Pope Leo?
I so to answer your question, yes, it will. I will say this. I know that Pope Leo is going to be interviewed by an American journalist, a prominent American journalist who's a straight journalist, not me. And it should come out within a few weeks. And it'll be a really important interview, and I'm very excited for it. I got to meet Pope Leo when he was digitally in 2014 when he was Father Robert Prevost. I've been working in Catholic advocacy in and out for a long time, so we were text buddies over the years. And so I've never. So the night of his election, I texted him congratulations, and he gave me like a thumbs up. So the thumbs up emoji. But
Love that.
I would, I don't abuse that number. I hold it
It's an
sacred.
infallible emoji.
Yes, no, it is. It's a good emoji. And I think so one other time he did the prayer emoji. So he has some range there. But I would say this. I think that my publication is to use a Latin phrase is ad extra, and that means to the outs. And so I'm less concerned about the internal politics of the Catholic Church. I'm more concerned about how the Catholic Church can help make our country better. And to me, I think the most important secular project of the Catholic Church in 2026 and in the United States is to defeat MAGA authoritarianism. My religious belief, and this is a dogmatic belief I have, Pope John Paul II was elected in 1978, and people don't realize this, but he was a Soviet pope. Like
Hmm.
he was Polish, but he was
Yeah.
Soviet. He was from behind the Iron Curtain, and I believe that God raised up a pope from behind the Iron Curtain to help defeat Soviet communism. It's my religious belief. I was there at the conclave when Prevost walked out. I think that God raised up a pope from the Americas in 2025 to help defeat MAGA authoritarianism. Which, let's be real, it is an American phenomenon, but as we can see, look at El Salvador, look at Venezuela, et cetera. This is a global movement, and I think that Pope Leo XIV can help defeat
Global
it.
Pope.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's important to note is that I want to be very clear. The Pope, we talked about America, and obviously we covered the United States. It's very important for him to see himself as a global. He is the Pope of the world. He does not want to be particularly um, obsessed with America, but obviously America plays such a big role in what's going on right now. So he's always mindful of that. So I think his helps to defeat MAGA authoritarianism. It's not about Pablo. It's not about Christopher. It's not about America. It's not about the United States. It's about the globe. I believe he believes it as a global good.
I mean, I think that it should be all about Pablo and Christopher. We should team up and book the Pope
Yes.
and interview him in Vatican City, with the Chicago White Sox game on in the background or something like that on some old Roman TV, like some caricature like of a 1970s film. But if you didn't get an interview with the Pope, this is the last question.
Sure.
What would be your first question for Pope Leo?
I think the first question I asked for him is like, what can we do to help his ministry as the Bishop of Rome? What does he want for us practically? Um,
Us in terms of like letters from Leo or publishers or humanity or Catholics or
I
American
think just
Catholics.
Catholics, everyday
Okay.
Catholics. I think I'm really concerned about the Jane and Joe Catholics. I think what's really important for me is um, probably I don't know if you go to mass or not, but 65% of Catholics who are baptized don't go to mass weekly, and that's fine. That's not for me to judge, but I think it's really interesting because a lot of the way that we think about Catholicism and talk about Catholicism is for those who are in the pews every Sunday. But we're Catholic by the grace of baptism. What's interesting in the Catholic Church is it's almost impossible to leave. You can get excommunicated, but you're still Catholic. You can try to leave, but you're still Catholic. And so I have a particular focus for those who aren't in the pews on Sunday. And I'm not trying to get them back in the pews. I'll meet them where they are. But what is his hope for those people? Like, what is his one thing that he wants to do? Everyday Catholics, those who are in the pews and those who are not. And I think for a social movement, if I'm only going to build a social movement of Catholics who are in the pews on Sunday, I'm not going to have a damn effect. Like, there's just not going to be any help. I'm really focused on those who are kind of on the peripheries of the Catholic Church. And I think that I want to be a gathering place for them. But yeah, I think so. To narrow the question, maybe it is like what can we do to help his ministry? I don't know what this project is, but I do want to be at the service of Leo as much as we can.
I think that I would ask him, "Will you bless me, Father, for I have sinned," And
Yes,
I will go
and
from there,
you
like, I that would
you
be
gave a better answer than I did. That's exactly what you should
well,
ask
when
him. Yeah,
Francis came to the White House during Obama, I went to the Roman Catholic store over on K Street, and I bought probably 25 wrist rosaries, like the
rosaries. Yeah, yeah.
$3.50 wooden bead, rosaries that go around your wrist, which are surprisingly durable, but, they're inexpensive. So I stuffed my pockets. I had a sort of, um, a sport coat on and, like, pockets, and, like, they were just overflowing with rosaries from the Catholic store when Leo blessed the crowd of 4,000 plus people on the South Lawn with Obama seated behind him. I was like, mission accomplished. I have
Yeah.
25 rosaries blessed by the Pope Francis himself. And, I was 40 yards off or 50 yards off from the podium by the Rose Garden where he was blessing us from, but it still counted as far as I was concerned. So I put them in envelopes and I sent them to the four corners of my life, to the Roman Catholics who, growing up or, at Notre Dame or whoever, anybody who I had like a distinct Catholic experience with in my life, I wrote them a little handwritten letter and I slipped them a rosary that was blessed by Pope Francis at the White House. And since then, the stories I've gotten back about where those rosaries have been, like they've been on deathbeds, they've been there for the birth of, like, as on the wrist of a parent, a brand new parent, like for the first time. It's interesting where people take theirs because I kept one for myself, and I can't think of any time since when I was going into a situation that was like significant, like, a big, like, where I had advanced warning that this was going to be a core memory type situation that without that on my wrist. It's like, um, it's beautiful. It was cool. So I don't think Leo's going to come during Trump because I think that the decorum of the papacy is such that it becomes the biggest weakness when you're in physical proximity to somebody who wants to like play with your papal hat and like slap you on the knee and start, saying you're getting asked questions about like, Jeffrey Epstein, and the Pope is sitting next to you. It's a spectacle. Like President like Obama, you could come to because, there's a mutual there's a mutual respect and there's a mutual decorum of the White House as an institution that's on the level. But this is Gomorrah, So, on the one hand, it's where the Pope is most needed to talk some sense into these people. Um, but also the place where the Vatican, the most damage could be done to the institution of the Vatican. So, anyway, that's
Yeah.
all I got. Is there anything else you want to say before we hop off?
So I will. So first, I wanted to say I think that beautiful story of getting those wrist rosaries blessed by Pope Francis. I think and you said them across the globe, and you said some of these people may practice religion or not, but that it's a meaningful thing. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the faith is that whether or not like you practice the faith, if you go to church, you go to mass, etc., it's in your bones. It's something that
Yeah.
we have inside of us, and every Catholic, I think, as far as you've been away from the faith or not, there's something inside of you, I think, that has an affection for the deepest, best parts of the faith, and I think that it's remarkable that we are so blessed to have a pope from our shore, that shares our life, knows our language, knows what it means, and so I'm very thankful for the Letters from Leo community. But I wanted to end Pablo, with you and your work with Migrant Insider. You're a Notre Dame grad, yeah,
I
a
am.
proud Notre Dame grad, class of '06. There for decent football years, got maybe a little bit better since. What do you think about Notre Dame and its mission? And how do you think Notre Dame can better serve this country, better serve the church, and what's doing right and perhaps what's doing wrong? What is your assessment?
I think that Notre Dame and the American Catholic experience has always been sort of a petri dish of liberal and conservative thought and education, right? To conservative on campus, everybody's a liberal out to get them. To the liberal, everyone's a conservative out to get them. And then there's a bunch of people in between who, by the time they graduate, realize that really this is all overblown and some people are just really dramatic. You know what I mean? Like some people are really into like what they're talking about. Like there are these protesters at Notre Dame that would come when I was there and take fake blood in like carriages and protest abortion like on Notre Dame Avenue right before the football game, and they would chain themselves to things to get arrested and stuff like that. And I am not somebody who wades into the abortion debate. If anything, like it's just not something I really think about too much. But I do admire a good protest, and these people were dedicated. And on the left, you have people like my mother who would go there and then go to Santiago to teach at like a poor school where she met my father. I was born. That's why I'm Pablo Enriquez. But the question of whether or not Notre Dame's doing enough is interesting because Notre Dame just provides so much infrastructure, like incredible infrastructure in and faith and global reach. Like, so they can get you in a situation to do meaningful work that is important to you. They have a system for doing that that's brilliant. On the question of whether or not the Fighting Irish are doing enough, I would say no, right? Notre Dame was a Catholic school founded in a time of expansion, like westward expansion, but became an immigrant school for the
A
underdog.
middle class school, right? For it
Mhm.
was a way to it was a ladder to the middle class. It was the
Right?
American dream ladder.
For like the children of European immigrants to go and my grandfather's a great example. He got into Yale out of high school, but they didn't give him a scholarship. So Notre Dame was the only other place he applied. And he said at the time, all you really needed was a letter from your priest and good grades, and you were fine to get into Notre Dame. Whereas these coastal ivies, the ancient coastal ivies of America, were much more process oriented. Like, they had established families and so on and so forth. The University of Notre Dame was, still putting up brick buildings with like the help of the students who like were wielding hoes and garden tools throughout the summer to like plant crops and all the rest. So when the Klan came and said these Catholics need to get out of northern Indiana, like the Indiana Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, the University of Notre Dame, the men of Notre Dame, right? The priests got them together and said, boys, we're going to go kick the shit out of these people. So grab the garden tools and the brass knuckles and anything else you got, because we're going to go over to Main Street, South Bend, Indiana, to the second floor headquarters of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan Northern Indiana chapter, and we are going to beat the living shit out of them. And this brawl went on for days, right? Days. But the Klan was driven out of South Bend by the University of Notre Dame
By the Fighting
Fighting
Irish.
Irish, right? So now we're in a situation where Leo has said that immigrants are a priority. The dignity of immigrants, if you think about it chronologically, of his statements of his papacy, is the first priority, right? So it's
Mhm.
a priority. It's a huge priority, and it was the first priority of the first American pope's papacy. And American Catholicism has its bedrock in Notre Dame. It's the institution, right? Leo is well familiar with it. I'm sure he's been there a lot, right? Just being like from the region. And Father Bob Dowd, the new president of Notre Dame, visited Leo shortly after Leo was elected. And I asked around, and no one would say what Bob and Leo talked about. But Bob's from Mishawaka, so Mishawaka, Indiana, which is right up the way from where Leo's from. So I think that Notre Dame, under the leadership of Father Bob Dowd, should hearken the days, not necessarily of like, you know, brigand first generation American immigrant children with garden tools beating on people in the streets, but a little bit further toward the present and the era of Father Hesburgh, Father Theodore Hesburgh, right? Now, is Father Bob Father Hesburgh? No. And these are different people with different styles, but I think they're equally potent. Bob is a political scientist, right? Father
Mhm.
Bob studied conflict and democracies in Africa and like different and multi-religious states in Africa. He was actually my priest in residence in St. Edward's Hall when I
Wow.
was at Notre Dame. So I think that if Bob isn't the TV superstar, basically, that Father Hesburgh was, a brilliant man, an excellent administrator of the university, but a mega celebrity because he could go on TV and he was like the Frank Sinatra of priests talking about politics and morality and the daily news on the biggest network shows in America, right? Notre Dame has that in Rome. Notre Dame has access to Roman scholars who could fill the Father Hesburgh media gap. And, as more and more priests come onto the national stage for the first time since before the scandals of John Paul II, that came out sort of like during John Paul II's papacy, um, the public association with the Roman collar and priesthood is not the past, it's the present. Like how they're helping now in the moment is after a long penance, I would say, culturally as a brand, the priesthood um, is a perfect time for Notre Dame to start to fight, if the undocumented communities of Mishawaka or Indiana or whatever have an issue that they obviously should have a sanctuary at Notre Dame. And if Stephen Miller or anybody in the White House wants to say, well, we don't do sanctuary cities, we're certainly not going to do sanctuary campuses, we don't care if it's Notre Dame, then Bob, I'm telling you that if applied through the full weight of the Catholic social influence network in politics, right? uh, would be able to beat Stephen Miller 10 times out of 10. They're not going to touch Notre Dame, obviously, right? Now, there's a concern that I think is from the previous presidency's era about like all this grant money and money that's coming in. They've set up all this infrastructure to get more federal grant money and stuff like that. And they don't want to risk it to help out, like, a couple of busboys and some cleaning ladies who are on the run from ICE. Well, that's the wrong way to think about it as a third generation legacy of the university. In fact, that's the opposite way of the way you should be thinking about it. The doors of Notre Dame must be open. And if you get caught, you should own it proudly as standing for what what Pope Leo said and Pope Francis said before him needs to happen when it comes to the most vulnerable of us, right? We open the door, we welcome we welcome them in. They used to be us, um, and that's what Notre Dame needs to stand for, in my opinion, more forcefully. It needs to be the Fighting Irish, not just on the safe stuff, like fighting to cure cancer, fighting to you know, clean up the
Everyone's anti-cancer.
bill
Yeah.
or whatever. No, no, no. Fighting for the immigrant who's being kidnapped by masked federal agents on the taxpayer dime. You think Father Hesburgh would put up with this bullshit? Absolutely not. He would give Father Ned Joyce the keys to the Golden Dome and say, I'll be back after we've won this argument, right? After this crisis has concluded one way or another. And he would go and do things like, work on the civil rights bill, you know, uh, meet directly with Nixon frequently and annoyingly about de-escalating. At first, the protests and that were making Americans unsettled in the '60s against Vietnam, but later to end the war in Vietnam. So he was just active and he was present. And Notre Dame should never be afraid of a president. You know, Notre Dame should be seeing a president eye to eye. So Bob should see Trump eye to eye. And if he doesn't feel like he sees Trump eye to eye, that's not the role he wants to play. Then he needs to empower somebody to see Trump eye to eye so that Pope Leo's agenda can be manifest and realized through the university. That's
You
my
know,
take. They could do
it-
better, but they do a great job. And I think when they do cure cancer, it's going to come from Notre Dame. We got a Supreme Court justice now, and Amy Coney Barrett. My grandfather, class of 1940, never would have imagined that would happen. He didn't think much of Notre Dame Law School. He went to Columbia Law School. And, you know, I know that if he had seen Amy Coney Barrett, nominate, confirmed to the Supreme Court, it would have changed his mind just like it changed mine. I'm so proud of Notre Dame Law School. I disagree with probably most things that Amy Coney Barrett and I wouldn't have the best, like, you know, conversation over coffee about ideology, but we could talk about Notre Dame all day.
It reminds me what you said reminds me, and I'll end with this. Pope Francis, in his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. If anyone's ever read it, I encourage you. It's a short hour and a half read. It's beautiful. He says, "I prefer a church that is dirty, bruised, and broken because it's been out on the streets versus a church that's sick because it's been closed in upon itself. So I love that visual, and I think that's a
That's
great, a
beautiful.
dirty, bruised, and broken Notre Dame in service of
Yes, a
of our country.
dirty, bruised, and broken, the Fighting Irish. That's so good. My pen ran out of ink, but I'm gonna text you to get that exact quote because that's beautiful. I'm gonna write a post about it, and I'm gonna lead with that.
Well, thank you so
So,
much, Pablo.
yeah,
I re-
thanks for coming on, Christopher. This I don't do a lot of, Substack Live, so sorry if this was awkward or
no, no.
long.
Can you tell us how to
I've
subscribe to
heard
Migrant? Can you tell us how to subscribe to Migrant Insider for letters from Leo's folks so we can get on it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Migrant Insider is my daily immigration newsletter from Washington, D.C. We cover policy. I really like to scoop news and hold people accountable. You can find it at migrantinsider.com. It too is also a Substack. So super easy if you want to support it. You can subscribe for free. And if you can't afford a subscription, just DM me with your email address and I will take care of you. No questions asked. Believe me, I've been there. So thank
Thank
you.
you. And we're at Letters from Leo. It's the lettersfromleo.com. Free and paid subscribers. You can also send a donation as well. I have a lot of content out there. I think it's worth it. We love to have you part of our community. We're growing every day. One of the fastest growing subsites in the country. We want to make this country more just and less cold. So, Pablo, thank you. It means the world.
Awesome. Thanks, Christopher. Let's do this again soon.
Thank you.
I gotta figure out how to turn it off. Oh, there it is.